Story so far thing. First 2 days, go back, see one of the stories so far from that. Basically, an early attack, earlier than serious fighting was really conducted, happened and drove the army of Bohemia off the map. That caused me to change some of the, to have units shift their focus from one road to another, etc., making up some rules to do so. And Austrian Klenau's corps up there had been chased off that way. It tried to come back in. It's been repulsed. Hesse-Homburg was shifting up this way to try to help them. It's been stymied. The combined guards, Russian and Prussian, and in a way the Hesse-Homburg is quality stuff. It's the stuff that didn't just get raised for this engagement. The guards made some definite progress, but it looks like they've been stopped by, I don't know which guard this is. That ain't it. Who do we got here? I'm looking for him. Oh no, the first young guard there. That's second young guard up there. And Marmont crushed the Austrians. Here, Victor is chasing Meervelt back into there, and Meervelt has kind of set up a defensive line there. Meanwhile, Lauriston is coming down, and just this coordinated attack on the army of Bohemia stuff. We shift over. We had Meervelt came in from here. He was the only thing that came in from here. Theoretically, more stuff should have been coming in from there, but the French line looked too strong to bring the troops on, so they made some shifts. The coalition has made some serious misjudgments, I would say. Over here, we've got a couple more corps from the army of Bohemia, which is all this stuff over there, launching an attack on the Old Guard and Sebastiani's cavalry. The Cav has largely been driven back. The Guard hasn't really been impacted, but York's Prussian corps under Blücher is heading this way. Meanwhile, this is army of Silesia, more of it over there under Langeron heading up. The goal here was to try to catch the Old Guard in some sort of pincer, but this is just nasty, nasty terrain. There's no way across the river except there, and then over there, and then this is just swamps that, control of the road is the only way to get down there. So there's going to be some fighting near Leipzig. Now, what's weird is the towns themselves don't really serve as great defensive positions because you don't have a lot of firepower coming out of them. The wall cancels that out, and you end up unable to do anything. And if you take a look at the village town, artillery has to be limbered, which means you can't even set up guns within the city to fire out the wall. Unlike these situations where I've got some artillery that can actually fire over the wall, the infantry basically might be able to if it's got a high fire value, but probably can't. So we've got a situation overall where I'd say the French are doing a pretty good number on the army of Bohemia, where they focus most of their effort. And really that's all that's been engaged anyway. The army of Silesia is just getting into range now. It doesn't look too promising, and I'm kind of considering whether or not the coalition wants to call off this attack here. This attack no longer is an attack as far as I'm concerned. Only the Guard is trying to press forward anymore. Everything else is really just trying to defend a portion of the board so that we have a chance to rest overnight and don't have to just keep marching on and off the field like we were before. All right. that's the story so far today. 10 a.m., not a lot, you know. The day started at 6. The fighting really started around 8:30 or so, 7:30 at the earliest. And yeah. So done with the French movement and their Cav Charges as well. Pursuit over here, a couple of places where I softened up the enemy with Cav. I think this was one. Kellerman blew his Cav after turning those units into squares. There was another one. Yeah, down here. We also, and we're gonna smash into those guys. Break up that line a little bit. So, I mean, the nice thing about a Cav charge is whatever the opponent does about it, it's putting him at some risk. If he tries to convert to square, there's a chance that he might become disordered, and thus a really good target for the Cav. If he doesn't try to go into square, he's a decent target for Cav. And if he succeeds in going into square, the Cav blows or ignores him, and he's a great target for everything else. So it's this wonderful threat that you can make on the attack, which is why you need Cav for the defense, but Cav for the defense doesn't really work except with the light Cav with the optional rule, because except on the flanks, a Cav charge right down the center of the line, or right at the center of the line, is, you know, pretty damn effective. They don't have to get close enough to get shot to be a problem. Then over here, Sebastiani is pulling out, leaving Druid on his own. We've got Suham heading up there. For the most part, the French have been kind of static this turn, recovering some fatigue points that we've been accumulating and whatnot. And again, this is where being on the attack is to your advantage. The defender quite often has to fill in gaps and all kind of crap like that. I find the attacker doesn't often have to do that as much. I'm not sure why. You know, I certainly filled in gaps here, but we're kind of in a mixed situation of attack and defense here. But yeah, it's often possible for the attacker to just decide, okay, well, I don't want to press the attack. I'll just throw out some skirmishers, and that's good enough, and rest a little bit. Or I move forward a little bit and don't expend any effort. But wherever the defender is being threatened by the attacker, if the attacker moves, the defender is being threatened and often has to do some sort of counter move, which means that a tired defender has a harder time recovering, is really what it comes down to. Because you can often create a threat with cavalry or artillery elements of an infantry corps, which doesn't pay fatigue for moving those. And that threat's enough that the defender has to react to. Anyway, getting into some esoterica there, essentially, in order to avoid starting and going down the line and doing all the firings. Dangerous thing that I'm facing, in part with the old guard, maybe even more with the Russians, is guard units are small. So they vaporize. They're not going to run away, but they still take hits like anything else. And they're gone forever when they get killed. There's no stragglers or anything, and that makes sense. So yeah, it's a painful process watching units disappear, and a good number of the Russian Imperial Guard have. Elsewhere, I had some interesting choices. What's up with you, dude? You don't belong there. Where artillery were abandoned, where I could have meleeed them, wasn't willing to expend the fatigue for it again. Now, you might say, well, it's free gun, right? Yeah, but most guns are 2 steps. And in this case, the couple that I've taken out are some guard artillery that's 3 steps. I probably have gotten a hit on it already in order to cause a morale check that they failed. And I didn't check to make sure. And the firepower that I have arraigned against them is fairly good chance to kill the remaining unit if it pulls out, unless somebody walks in there and gives it cover. So, you know, in this case, I would have been, I wasn't too worried about the fatigue issue, but I would have been putting my unit in a really, really dumb place where the Austrians could have reacted and caused issues. Now, we had that kind of penetration happening over here. I'm willing to live with it, but in this case, that line's fragile enough, or small enough, really, in terms of it doesn't have a lot of length to it. There's no extended formations here. So even if you have a big unit, you can't like, I mean, I could have a bunch of one-strength units that present a full firing line of all the power that you could possibly put. In a line, right? You know, 1 and 2 strength units, it doesn't make a difference because nothing loses its firepower over casualties. But I could also have an 8-step unit that's completely fresh, and it can only be in the hex that it's in. It cannot extend into another hex. It can't use that size to give you anything else. And again, this is where some of the abstractions are a little weird. You can maybe do some hand wavy stuff saying, well, you know, those one-step units are almost like a skirmisher type formation. No, but they have too much firepower, right? They're like a dense, powerful firing formation. And the idea is 1 step of units appears to be the full firing capacity you can put out of a hex. If that's the case, okay, I can understand why you couldn't extend a 2-step unit, but an 8-step unit, you know, and it doesn't add up. Anyway, I am going to have to do some stuff for my lawyer today. He's kind of insisting I do my taxes, or else they're just going to hold things up on me. So. But I think I'll probably get at least the Austrian side of the turn in here. Other than those things, not too much is changing. Hesse-Homburg is really kind of falling apart over here. Like I said, units are disintegrating here. This isn't in good shape. That corps is gone. This side of the board, the French have won. They just haven't reaped all the rewards of their victory yet. Over here, it's a lot less clear. Whatever the coalition was trying to do today isn't going very well. The Imperial Guard beginning to disintegrate here, the Russian Guard. And got this huge artillery reserve here that I'm trying to bring up and cause some pain to the French, but I may just be throwing my artillery reserve away. We'll see. It can go very badly. Artillery is very powerful, but if it gets close enough that the infantry can reach it, and Cav, if it really wants to risk things. I mean, both of them will bleed heavily. So yeah, this pocket here that I wanted to carve out some space with and kind of define territory that I could operate from, I'm afraid I'm going to lose much of it again on this day. Over here, well, I mean, the old guard lost a unit, but they're holding the line so far, and I've got another corps coming up to join, so, you know, they may be able to be relieved, basically. Of course, they'd be being relieved by something a whole lot less effective. But if they're just stiffened, well, there's not a lot of room here for 2 corps to be operating, which is a problem that I'm seeing with York as he's trickling in. If I was coming in on this side, it would be fine, but my orders were to come from this side. And I don't know. I might check Gulai and talk to him about shifting over. But once you're committed, it's hard. It's like you have to disengage, and that's an expensive procedure that can get you pretty badly hurt. We actually have a little bit of rallying going on down there in the woods. But yeah, not much else. And I think it's 10:30 at this point. That sounds right. Into the French 10:30 turn. Boy. So we got some routers who are heading off here. Druitt decided to swing around the flank, and he's starting to roll up Gulai's forces there. That'll give him a chance maybe to better face the Prussians. Sebastiani managed to drive off some of the Prussian cav, and that'll help a little bit, I guess, and also recovered units that were damaged. I don't know if that'll happen now. Looks like if he blew anything, it recovered, and it shouldn't have yet. So I'm a little confused, but I may not have actually blown the cav. May have been handled differently. Over here, Victor took a little breather. Lauriston continuing his march forward and really kind of breaking up Mirvelt here. The Russian guard got caught in kind of an ugly way because of trying to position cannons to hit other things, and I don't know what the hell is up with this flanking action going here, but it ain't pretty for them, I'll tell you that much. And driving off forces that were threatening the flanks over there. Meanwhile, continued push forward by Oudinot, driving away a few of the Austrians that were causing problems, and also beginning to put some pressure on these artillery. I ought to just get that shit all out of here. It's over. I can't connect up with these guys. Blew some of them out of the village finally. One of the weirdnesses that happens, you can see this little connection there. Those guys were in position for a while, and I just forgot about them. But they managed to rout this Austrian cav that got lost behind the lines. And that's the problem. Napoleon, there he is. He's heading off to go talk to MacDonald, because if there's anything I need done, MacDonald is the something I can do it with. However, I don't really have space for him. I mean, I guess he could make a way through here, but that seems really like an expensive trip that maybe I wouldn't be able to make over the course of a day. I'm pretty comfortable with what's going on here, though, so that might be the best thing for him. Meanwhile, yeah, we got those routers there. I guess that's about it. This may be the last half turn of the day. A turn and a half. It's better than I expected. Plus, I got my taxes finished. I did a lot of the work this weekend, but yeah. The answer that I gave to my lawyer kind of means that I didn't need to do them. I thought that he needed a copy of them or something, and no, he just needed to know how much money, how much money of the refund, of whatever refund, is due to my wife. And it's like, well, she paid nothing in taxes. I boosted up my withholdings to cover the extra money that she made, working as a contractor. So I think that's the right answer. The only question is she do the individual exemption out of it all? And I can't see where she would because she paid nothing, you know? I mean, I don't think you get a rebate off your exemption if it were to work that way. Her exemption, you know, would have, I mean, I was covering her taxes essentially anyway. Given that, what's really screwed up is she was only alive for like a month and 10 days last year. And so like she made almost nothing at all, which might change things somehow. I don't know. Anyway, we'll see what they come back with. Inside of the 10:30 turn, I'm largely calling off whatever attacks the Army of Bohemia is making over here. Austrian force up to the north is just going to start falling back. I think if under pressure I could withdraw without a penalty, I may have to, if I'm not under pressure, make a roll for an initiative to leave the map, I think. Given, you know, I make all kind of shit up. Hesse-Homburg and the guards have not given up their orders, but they're not really pursuing them. They've lost another unit and straightened up their line a little bit. Hesse-Homburg building this artillery line, hoping that it repulses. There's not a whole hell of a lot facing them except Mortier up there. However, where Mortier is at his strongest is where we don't have our guns deployed yet and whatnot. My intention is to fall back as far as I need to. Might be this ridge line here. Like I said, the guards are currently holding. I can cancel my orders and fall back. Again, these rules, here's the weird thing. I don't feel like I could have handled this game if I hadn't played CWB beforehand and NBS and whatnot. But because of the way the orders are, I could have handled it without the written orders, but I feel like a lot of the play around how do I interpret orders, what do I do with them and what not, the level 4 orders, I don't think I could play with those without having seen other systems that did it in a more formalized and nailing everything down type of manner. And I mean, CWB doesn't, and NBS don't do all that great a job of that. There's a lot of wiggle room in how you want to interpret that. And I've had discussions along those lines with people I play with, you know, are you sure your orders allow you to do that type of questions? Because some of the stuff seemed a little out of hand. And then we would discuss what their orders were, if they were willing to defend the point. And, you know, I mean, I would just take yes, I am positive, you know, okay. Back here, they're canceling their orders, but I don't know how much they had more than like what they're doing. So it's a disorganized mess there, and disorganized messes fall apart easily. We got another one there. It's not just, hey, there's a lot of disordered units. There's holes in the line. The line can't hold up. Having a bunch of disordered stuff behind your line, as long as you can keep a solid line, works okay. Liechtenstein, he's demolished right now, so he's just trying to rally his forces and recover. Gulai, continuing his attack. York, taking some rest time. Then we get to Langeron, and I found out I oopsed. Langeron was supposed to come from Magdeburg. I'm just going to write this off. He shifted, whatever. I notice Austin Sacken is coming in from Magdeburg. I just didn't really see things too much. It's not that big a difference, but it may afford some advantages to the coalition to have forces coming in from both roads. Prevent some traffic jams. I guess it's fire-eating time. A counter mismatch, which I don't recall seeing one like this in the errata, but I think I've seen other cases of it. In this case, the unit's number is 62. It's on both sides. I look at 62, and that is not an artillery unit. I looked up the particular unit. It's the artillery 15. You've got to pick it up and look close to see that. That's supposed to be number 65. I don't know if there's some other 65 somewhere. I mean, but I'm going to have to correct that one, I think. I'm worried about being able to mark up something that closely. I didn't do too bad a job on this side. It ain't pretty. This is why I don't like marking counters. But on this side, it's fucking unreadable. At least it's enough that it'll tell me that's not the right unit. We into turn 11 with yet more forces coming on. Nothing too exciting. The lines are pretty much what they were. But man, something like this is really fatiguing, and I've gotten to that point. There's always this point in the big games, maybe even some of the smaller ones, where it's like, oh Jesus, how do I drag myself through this crap? You know, it's taking a couple hours a turn, basically, an hour per player side, as opposed to the 20 minutes that I kind of think is the right level from, like, you know, second day of TSS or whatever. 25 minutes per turn feels about right to me. This is definitely a bigger game. Although, you know, number of units is not that huge. Footprint is tremendously larger, but also the complexity of the system is just significantly higher to deal with. A lot of that simply being, some of that is the look up and, you know, take the casualties and everything, and I'm relatively used to that, but a lot of it just has to do with, this is Napoleonics, it's not American Civil War, you know? It's just harder to deal with. But also, I think there are other natures of this system, even if, you know, I had no Cav going on in this one, in this particular turn, at least nothing of any significance. So something about this system makes it more painful to me in a number of ways. I think it has to do with the number counters. I think they're particularly cumbersome means of handling because they're covering so much information. But you know, theoretically, it's not as clear at this point. I like this kind of game a lot. It's just, it does hit a certain point where you just like hit your barrier, and it's like pushing through this is tough. And I'm not halfway through, at least the time that's allotted for it. I also ought to be counting up, do a quick glance at forces and see if anything's cracked. A good time to check. A couple of French forces were wavering. Sebastiani and one of his units fell back, and Augureau, one of his, did as well. Not a major effect. And then there's also the, how am I going to remember which units are all, you know, yeah, I have my markings, but I have a hard time remembering and getting the morale states right. Yeah, sue me, you know. It's not that big a deal if I just screw up and end up giving something too high a morale when I make a check. It's not like some of the counters aren't fucked up anyway. And as I've said many times, my other failures in the game are probably a worse impact. You know, not understanding the rules correctly for some case or another, you know, neglecting fire from units, whatever. There's just a whole bunch of built-in churn in when you play something, especially of this size, that like, yeah, you're not going to get everything right, and that's just okay. You know, deal with it. You're going to fuck things up. It's probably going to even out in the end. The only thing that I kind of worry about is when I catch myself fucking up, having just fucked up, whether my reaction there favors one side or the other. Of course, strategy and whatnot might favor one side or the other. I feel like I've done a really horrible job with, and maybe some of the rules I made up with the coalition forces. But on the other hand, the coalition would be destroyed if I played strictly by the rules, because the army of Bohemia would not have had a place to hide off the map without getting knocked out of the game. And so, you know, any rules interpretation I made to make making them come back on that may have kind of disrupted things, like some of the forces being here, some coming on here, and the majority coming back way back here with delays and whatnot. I'm okay with all of that. What I'm a little bit more worried about is that I progressed and went with an offensive strategy over here, but I felt I had to try to connect up with those forces. I went with an offensive strategy here, but I felt like I have numerical superiority. I might just break those guard. I mean, I've disintegrated another guard unit. Yes, they're coming around the flank, but their whole formation is beginning to look a lot weaker. And, you know, I was bragging about, yeah, the guard is mighty. It really fucking is, but it's small. And it could well be destroyed here, facing, you know, a reasonable Austrian corps and a rather large Prussian corps, just through attritional effects. And if that happens, the key path to Leipzig becomes in effect. I was conversing online in some of the in some of the comments of the videos. There's at least one person who seems relatively interested in what's going on. I wonder if it's the guy who did the videos. I can't keep I can't keep conversations aligned and like, you know, it's not something that just sticks to my head. Like, there's a few people that I really, really recognize from my channel. But yeah, because I had a conversation with the guy who had done the videos before, and his maps worked fine. My capability of putting things together doesn't work is really the problem. I just don't have things aligned perfectly. But I wouldn't be surprised if it is that same person. Was concerned about how sort of valueless the Lindenau, Leipzig area seems. It's true. You know, there's no victory conditions that say you must hold this territory in this game. It's you must destroy the enemy army. The one place where I would put that is I might make up rules that leverage the French withdrawal rules, that at least one of the scenarios has a what if. What if the French withdraw, you know, after the battle starts going badly? And there's a point where Napoleon could get his army out in fairly good shape, and that would not have been as bad a result as what ended up happening. And any chance of that working is going to be very, very difficult without control of the road network that comes out of Leipzig. It's not impossible, though. I mean, it really isn't. You can use a couple of corps as rear guards and pull forces out and whatnot. In the end, I'm going to count the casualties and, come up with some sort of analysis to it all, because I actually don't think it's going to be very likely to destroy the enemy army, which is an undefined statement in the game. But the way I'm interpreting it is pretty much have everything in desperation morale. Obviously, it can't be everything because, well, you could guarantee that you don't get your army destroyed by keeping some little core, just out of danger for a long time. And it would be really, really easy to avoid that with Cav. But on the other hand, I don't know how else to take that word. It's going to be completely subjective at the end. There's no victory conditions that I can really tie this nicely to. It comes down to the Dean Essig victory conditions that he kind of wishes that he could put in every game and not put anything else in, which is you should be able to tell who won. The counter that I modified, it was an error. 65, artillery 15, great. That's what I got here, right? Yeah. No. 65 is not. 62 is artillery 15 under Goliath. This is one of the problems I have is, first of all, using the same number basis as the only sensible means of finding things. But secondly, that I don't think that there's actually, I think these artillery numbers are bullshit. I don't think that they have anything to do with anything. Now, the fact that this is 3rd Corps Artillery 15 is a little different from Artillery 15, which is here. It doesn't, I don't know, maybe this says 2nd Corps Artillery 15, but on these sheets it just says Artillery 15. And since all the artillery is numbered, Artillery 1, Artillery 2, etc., those numbers are going to be close for the two sides. So you look at the wrong sheet, you get a number that's wrong on the counter, or you get a number that seems close on the counter and a designation that seems close, and it's a really easy mistake to make. And now I have ruined the counter worse than I thought I had. Solution. A problem that never would have happened, right? If, geez, it hadn't been that there's 70 counters that have errors on them in this game. Just a lack of detail in the, in the quality control side of things as to hey, this should go off to the printer before, this needs to be checked before it goes off to the printer or whatever. You need a bunch of eyes on things. You need stuff like that. I understand it's not, no one who publishes these is a big shop. It really is the case. And, in this case, this was straight up from the ground here, simulation stuff. I think that the guy who ran that just was like, yeah, you've got a following, and sure, I'll publish you. And then later on at Legion, I'm not sure that there's a lot of support going in. And it makes sense, right? You're a small company, you don't have a lot of room for hiring extra people to look something over. And it's a working series, etc. Sure, you just take care of it and we'll print it for you and put our name on it and whatnot, and you'll be part of our stable, and that's great for both of us. Well, it doesn't end up that way, right? The more errors go into a game, the less the rule book is readable and understandable, the less it's, got sort of only one interpretation to it. And the more people that you're going to kind of drive away and who you might bring into the series, somebody, like Legion put out a few of these, somebody might pick one of them up, and then they look and they're like, geez, this, and they get a worse perspective on anything that they don't know about, right? So like if they're of this series and they see that the series wasn't enhanced or improved by Legion, by Grognard, whatever, you kind of have all the same errors still there. That kind of sucks. I guess they don't put a lot of work into their publication side of things. If you're already familiar with the publisher and comfortable with their stuff, well, you lose a little bit of respect that way, when it's that way. And finally, you certainly aren't going to go out and hunt another one of this designer's game if you have that problem. Now, for me, I know what I'm getting into. And this is better than the more recent ones that I looked at in a lot of ways. Although, I got to tell you, counter errata is probably the worst of all for me. Map errata, I can cut a little piece of paper on, this is a paper map, it's nothing fancy. You can kind of fake that. Map errata is pretty bad too. Anything that's real components. Rules errata, yeah, as long as they don't print it on glossy paper like they're starting to, you can just pencil in the changes. It doesn't work so well. And how little these games get played by people overall, there's not a lot in terms of errata for most of them. Like, you don't see files on BGG and whatnot. In fact, even this one, which had files available, they didn't make it to BGG. They're only on Concept World on the company thread. I have no idea how to find that shit. Somebody gave me a link. That's great. But it's not at BGG. It's not at Grognard.com, whatever that WebGrognards, whatever that became. It's got a different name now, I think. But these places where you can go look up a specific game and find the materials you need for it. For something a little older, WebGrognards tended to be the good place. This, I expect to be on BGG. No, yeah. Everything's just on a Consim World thread. Good luck finding that shit. Yeah, I'm getting a little grumpier than usual, but at the end of the French turn, I forgot to bring those guys in way back there. So I don't know who. I think they're the remainder of Suham, but I'm not sure. Somebody's trailing forces coming in. Olgard beginning to kick away and bust up Gulai's force here. The squeeze on here. Victor's not been pushing forward, but Lauriston has pushed them down towards Altenburg and is doing a good job. I found some guys who kind of got grabbed away by Auguro. When units look the same, it's an easy thing to do, so now I've got people counter-marching to make their way down and join their unit, and I'm fine with that, especially when it happens inadvertently. Like I said, hey, sometimes, commands got associated and detachments were made and whatnot. I feel like that's kind of below, in general, the Army commander's point of view. And of course, there are times, with units associated with thinking in Gettysburg, units associated with First Corps that were added to join Pickett's charge that, were from other corps even. But here you got the same kind of thing where somebody from a different corps ends up just sort of joining, I forget how big these battles are, ends up joining the command. Ideally, it would kind of be done through the orders system with detachments and whatnot. There might be rules about detachments. I'm trying to remember. I know there's so many different configurable things. And I'm also confusing it a little bit with the 1914 system, where there are detachments, and it just throws a wrench into a game where everything's about like these army. Ooh, squirrel fun. Everything's about way down there. We got some chasing going on. Everything's handled, with these army delimitations and whatnot. But because those weren't really a thing, they were on paper, but people could transfer stuff and everything. There's an artificial limitation to how much you can fiddle around with, but you've got pretty much enough freedom to screw around almost as much as you possibly would need to. And it all kind of obviates the whole command and control system. It's like, do I really need it? All you've done is created a lot of work at sort of the TO&E level, to use a more modern terminology. But here, it's the same kind of thing, but I just kind of don't mind if it's not my fault, and then they detach when I figure out who wandered in the wrong direction or whatever, and try to fix it that way. Although it's possible I might just leave them there if they're kind of important. It's just like, yeah. What it comes down to is command and control, command radiuses and whatnot are always an abstraction of something that is really, really flexible in practice. Like, there really should be no rules limiting it in terms of like, the commander at the battlefield could order any of this stuff to be changed to any degree you want it. But it didn't happen in actuality, which is kind of weird. It's like, in theory, the units are these separate commands. In practice, that was very mutable, but in actuality, that mutability was limited, and there's no real... You could put like, command penalties and whatnot in for that kind of thing. But I don't know how much that really represents what's going on. People could be detached and attached. Divisions could be moved around and stuff without a whole hell of a lot of disruption. Anyway, moving onward. After that long, not a lot has changed over here. There were some Cav Charges over there that did not necessarily go terribly well. The French lost a unit in basically pursuing this shit. It's like every time you send the Cav out to do something, there's a chance it gets hurt. And that chance isn't small, But on the other hand, pursuing enemy retreating and routing forces seems like their job, at least some part of their job description. So I'm like, well, if I don't do that, I'm not really playing the battle out in the time period. If I like, oh yeah, let them go, they might hurt us. Yeah, no, but they might. All right. I'm in a strange mood, and it's very pretty out. I think I want to get outside. So there's a good chance this is all there is for today. So we start the coalition turn at 11. Hard to read my writing. I had a couple of Cav attacks. The Prussians drove off some of Sebastiani here. And I sent a Prussian Cav here that scared some of this infantry. But it did set me to thinking, what is the cost of the Cav functionality added to, whatever you have in an ACW type game? I don't know, I'm just always curious about what I'm actually expending and why. First of all, actual Cav charges and whatnot have been fairly rare. Not absolutely, but there are turns where there are none, It takes two steps in the sequence of play. One before you do anything else except, I guess, orders, but I do it before that even just because it doesn't make much difference. And then in the melee step, those Cav Charges are going to be melees. When I usually am not going to have a melee attack because the fatigue cost is just too high. There's very little reason to do a melee attack in this game system, which is, or at least I feel disincentivized by it. Other people might get better effects out of it, but I feel like that's actually a weakness in the system, that the close combat ends up largely becoming unimportant, whereas it was, if anything, more important in the Napoleonic era than it is in an ACW type game. You get rid of the fatigue rules, though, which are optional, and the designer definitely has sort of a, I don't know if you should actually use it. These are highly experimental. If you get rid of those fatigue rules, you do see there's a lot more reason for melee, so you're maybe not adding a step in that case with Cav Charges. But the game system as a whole needs something in that fatigue slot, and I can't think of anything that will improve it right off the bat. If I think of something, I would suggest it. Okay. 2 steps in the sequence of play, that's not too big a deal. Not that many units are applied to it. So what is my big worry here? The rules burden, the first couple times you do it, it might have an impact, but then it flows in and you get used to it. It's not that big an issue. Here's where I think the biggest cost is. You have to scan the entire battlefield looking for Cav units, which are not necessarily obvious, and then apply some thought. And if you really, really want to do it right, and I do not, look up the strength of the unit and the strength of what they might be facing. Think a lot about the strategic considerations, etc. So the big cost here is really a matter of the tactical implications of using the Cav, rather than anything that's just pure game mechanics. And, you know, that's as it should be, but if you know me, I don't like having to make decisions. Just to give an example of how painful things have gotten, extricating this piece of the line because of opportunity fires, etc. I was too close to the French line with unprotected artillery, etc. It just ended up being, first of all, very painful. I lost my artillery units. And this is the artillery reserve, damn it. But also, it ended up taking like 15 minutes to do just that little portion, movement only. So an hour a half turn is starting to look sometimes a little optimistic. This is a particularly painful time. Breaking off combat is just particularly expensive. And again, it throws a monkey wrench in sort of the normal pattern of, oh yeah, well, we move a few units, but most of the stuff's in line. So there are some turns where you have a lot of movement, but there usually isn't much combat because you're approaching. Others, you don't have a whole hell of a lot of movement. You're just dressing the line a little bit, but there might be a lot of firing in the turn. And then finally, there's weird shit like this where you're trying to extricate yourself, but you're taking opportunity fire, and you're doing things like creating squares to try to protect the units that are withdrawing, and all kind of shit like that, where the turn gets really, really complicated and heavy. Glad I didn't do this yesterday. I was already frustrated. As I'm playing, I'm zooming in on all, the intricacies, and I don't do that much on the video, and it's probably for a good thing. But what it kind of means is I might be repeating things because the overall picture doesn't change all that much. I'm always worried about that kind of stuff. We got pretty much a mass failure over here by the Austrians. Some forces you know, recuperating, but basically we're getting off the board. This artillery here did some good stuff. So yes, disengagement was difficult, but having a big line of artillery to fall back to is kind of neat. I lost too much, but it means that on my disengagement, once I get the pathway cleared, I have free guns able to fire. And the French can disposition their guns so that they can get me back in their arc, but for the most part, they're having trouble getting their firing arcs because they set up for a different position, the one that I was in when I was too close. The Russian Guard is trying to hold its position, to hold a door open so Schwarzenberg can give orders for Meerkat or whatever, Meervelt, to pull back up onto this ridge. I'm going to try to defend a perimeter around here. That's probably going to be hard to hold, but I may still have pieces on the board at the end of the day at least. Which, things like this, it's looking like they're getting driven off the board, so I got to get them out of there. Over here, this is an interesting fight. The Austrians did not hold up well this turn, but you know, that old guard is wearing thin, and the Prussians, well, they're just sitting there kind of twiddling their thumbs saying, well, you know, there's not really a good approach right now. Might as well rest up a little bit. You know, I mean, it's to effect. Next turn, I almost certainly need to move because it's not worth resting to get 1 point back when I'm at this distance. Langeron getting close enough that he started taking some plinking fire on the lead of his column, and the Sackville Bagginses are coming in here, Austin Sack, and with his orders to try to penetrate this way. Attacking Leipzig from the north is basically what I gave him as orders. And that was painful. I might be able to get the French turn in. I'm expecting I'll be able to get the French turn in at some point today. I don't know how much more. Getting a turn and a half feels like a reasonable goal nowadays. French side of the turn, what's kind of changed? Mortier's forces pushing forward closer to the artillery there. I don't know if I'm doing anything with Nansudi. He just keeps getting ignored. That's fine. Oudinot, you know, I think I rested a 1 point rest, which means if I wanted to launch the melee here that I have an advantage on, it would actually cost me 2 points, one for the rest being undone and one for the melee being done. And that seems like too high a price to pay. So screw it. Over here we had forming a square to protect against an attack here that doesn't protect this guy directly, but I figure, you know, I want the firepower here. I didn't have it here, but this might eventually be able to provide pressure on that guard cav there. Up here, the guard throwing some protection up against this cav threat back there. As Suham shows up, gets some new orders from Ney, as Ney understands the situation better and is taking command up here. Murat's in command back there, but he's basically just rallying forces. And doing a pretty good job, actually. That guy way over there was about to rout off the board and finally got his rally success. I don't know. Where did I move Napoleon? Napoleon's up to something. He was talking. He was going to talk to someone. I don't know who he's going to talk to. Yes. He's talking to Agro to try to push the flank over here. And then I'm going to work with Oudinot. Oudinot did not try to rally this, though. They got lost somewhere. My blue dice are over there. Crap. So I'll have to use my reserve blue dice. Udino's not good enough for that. We'll put this in a town where it can be happier. I have to retrieve my dice. But yeah, that's where we've got. That's what we've got right now. McDonald has orders to go move north of Leipzig, but he's not implementing them yet. That happens next turn. Just like Suham, he got his orders this turn. He may not implement them next turn even, because he's rather fatigued. But my plan is to sweep out in front of Lindenau with him and try to clear, first of all, get Gulai out of there. He's just a mess. But try to work on clearing that Prussian corps before it starts hitting the guards. Guards everywhere are getting whacked hard. You can look at all these green and reds up here, but look at all the guards that are showing up in the dead pile for the French. In fact, I think the majority, if you mixed everything up, this whole section would probably be a guard of one type or another. They're small units and they disintegrate pretty quickly. They have a heavy, heavy punch. And in a sense, that may be enough of a penalty towards, you sure you really want to commit them? Is that they go away too quickly. Anyway. I guess that's it. I don't know if I'm coming back for another one today. I'm probably going to sit outside and drink for a while. Hey, squeezed out the last of the morning turns. And I'm going to put a 1 in there. I will not remember what's going on. Okay. Those forces almost completely off the map. There's a couple still in the woods. This defensive line holding up. The guards, of course, still holding. They just got their orders this turn to... Or no, they did not. No. They get their orders next turn to start withdrawing, and that'll be a turn later when they do. And they're going to try to form the corner here. But they didn't do a bad job here. Combination of this cav, only 2 steps of it, but they bypassed the square and managed to smack into a unit that couldn't turn into square, and then followed up into this space and destroyed that unit. And this unit shot the square to hell. Now, it had to undergo flanking fire first, but it survived that. And we've gained what looks like a little bit of time for these guys to reorganize and start pulling back. Although this fucker still won't leave. He may be doomed. Get this guy slowly running his way through the woods. Liechtenstein, he's so beat up he can't really do shit. But his cav maneuvered around a little bit. Force here beginning to rally. The Prussians moving forward, positioned some artillery that I thought was cav up here. Oops. And I don't have room. Oh, Jesus. Yeah, they're just fucked. I do not want that. Let me get them back there. I don't know if the other things would have been able to move. Langeron held back his unit. His lead unit that was within firing range was disordered already this turn. He didn't push any further. He rested a little bit as Austin Sacken is moving up. Given that I just loaded one up, I don't remember when, around 10 a.m. or whatever, my plan had been to go until noon because, that's kind of where the shift is for these things. We got more forces coming in and everything. Which, if they come in a little late because I forget about them, That's not a big deal in my head. But anyway, the situation, this withdrawal, if I can pull this off and hold here, that's kind of cool. I don't think I can bust the guard before Suham comes down and just starts mauling things. Although York has a bigger force. Attacking that line looks dangerous, but again, I've got some local, if I've got anything like local parity anywhere, it's over on this side of the map. This side, I'm outnumbered and outgunned, and it would be really, really helpful if I could put Leipzig into some sort of bind, just making it much, much harder for Napoleon to get his forces off in anything like a reasonable direction. Although, what is a reasonable direction? I mean, his troops are coming from up there, but I don't know that he wants to go back that way. Like, I think he wants to settle the Halle path. Let me take a peek at what the scenario objectives are on that withdrawal scenario, because that'll give me an idea. So, running away. Saving the army west of the Ulster, delaying the enemy at Leipzig, and finally exiting the map. Phew, great. Okay, let's see. I am not sure. So this is the October 17th, and we're not there. We're still on the 16th. So this is kind of interesting. On October 17th, Sacken and Langeron come in. Did I screw something up? Not according to this. So what I may be missing, I don't know what happens on October 16th here. Oh, geez. What are we talking about? What would the battle be? Be like goalless or something. Wachau, that's over here. Mockern. I don't remember where Mockern is. I've seen it. That's over there. So Mockern would be the one that's interesting for us here. And Langeron and Sacken come from Magdeburg, which is where they should have come from here. So whatever battle happened here, it looks to me like, unless the map is different for the October 17th thing, they got driven off the map essentially, the same way that I'm covering that in other situations that we've seen where the Army of Bohemia has gotten knocked off. So I feel a little bit more justified in terms of the, hey, Napoleon drives somebody away, says, okay, far enough, let's turn around and try to defeat the next force or whatever, try to get ourselves in a position, because he's got these multiple goals. The problem is that October 17th scenario, it doesn't really say the withdrawal option. It doesn't really say where he should withdraw to. Maybe if I look at some of the campaign maps, I can understand. Maybe he has to go back up that way. Maybe this is too dangerous, It seems so weird to me to have Prussians and Russians coming from this direction. It's like, Leipzig. I'm trying to think where it is, but it feels like it's west of Prussia. And this is the Army of Silesia, which means, that's far to the east in Prussia. Beyond Bohemia, the Army of Bohemia is coming up this way. And it's just the names of the armies. It's not where they're located just before the battle. But still, it's like, oh, geez. I just don't know enough about the campaign to be able to say, hey, would Napoleon be withdrawing back the way he came? And isn't that kind of a trap? I don't know. Because the Army of the North, I think, comes in from over there. Let's take a look at where they're coming from. I kind of like patching things together like this, on the fly especially. Army of Poland comes from Dresden, map 5. That's going to be way over there. Looks like Army of the North is going to be map 3, which is over here. So yeah, I mean, I get the feeling that the only way back for Napoleon is that way, if it comes down to it. Because obviously the Army of Silesia is comfortable enough to be operating, in Magdeburg, damn, that's far west. I mean, it's west of Prussia. So yeah. Okay, well, I've done enough navel gazing about that, I guess. French side, and I did a core morale check this turn, so I'll try to catch you up on some of that. The French had a few failures, and importantly, so did the coalition. A big one, actually. Marmont, approaching slowly, no big hurry. Nansudi trying to figure out what the hell's going on. He's going to go talk to Napoleon. I feel like I want to do a shift in position that's too high for him to do from what he can see. I don't feel like he can just leave the area, and I don't know quite where I want to station him, so taking a turn to go head towards Napoleon makes sense. Mortier, an artillery duel has been developing here. That's, I don't know, kind of an interesting thing, because those big guard artillery are a little bit more potent, but there's more reserve artillery for the Austrians, so they're kind of dealing each other out pretty evenly, with the Austrians hitting some of this as well. Poniatowski, his morale failed. I couldn't find the units that are damaged. The hell with it. But yeah, his artillery here and whatnot is all crumbling away. This is still pretty static, although notably the Prussian Guard. So this is an interesting thing. The Prussian and Russian Guard each have their own core morale, even though they're all under Constantine as a singular force. That kind of makes sense, but the Prussian Guard actually failed its morale, and we had a unit try to pull out and then got routed by withdrawal fire. Victor trying to make his way slowly up here. Lauriston also hit a failure. I don't think there was any real effect to that, but I got to remember the penalty. Augureau has one as well, and I don't think I've been keeping that into account. It's really hard to remember, when there's a couple key units that are in demoralized state, it's not that hard, but now it means checking stuff, and checking on morale checks, not the easiest thing to remember to do. I check the unit if it takes a casualty, but I don't worry otherwise if it's just a morale check. Suham, largely resting, although his cav pulled in down here. The old guard staying static. Everything pretty much the same up there. Marat is running around trying to rally units. Those are Pajol's forces. I don't know if they're moving enough. Sometimes it's kind of hard to keep track of anything. Anyway, definitely getting painful and more painful to play. You know, it's just the sheer size, and again, you know, no cav attacks whatsoever this turn, I think, right? Some threats are present, but no attacks were made, and no melee or anything, but just the movement and firing. What, you know, I guess this is, I don't know. It feels like this is the most burdensome game that I've played, which makes sense because it's also the largest number of maps. But it is a more streamlined system than some of the others that I've played that are pretty big. Things like Austerlitz. This system should travel more quickly than it does, in my opinion, and it just doesn't manage to do it for me. Mainly because, yeah, sure, there's a little bit less rules overhead. But honestly, the mechanical aspect overhead, once you have the rules down, is about the same. Our way through, the noon turn just ended. I can't remember the guy's name. Clenau. Most of his forces that were retreating or whatever are off the map at this point, I guess. It's not a very big force. A couple of units still back here. I got to kind of limp them out of there. Marmont could chase them down. He's been kind of lax about it, but okay. The artillery duel continuing here, still not resolved. I mean, both sides are taking casualties. It's the way of an artillery duel. If I wanted to charge forward with those guards, I could expend, you know, probably more losses in exchange for taking the territory, which might be very important, because this is where the coalition is heading to defend. I don't really know that, though. Things holding up here okay, I guess, for the Russians. They're shooting up some more of the Young Guard. Meervelt pulling back a little bit with mainly Prussian Guard units. And this Cav unit, which performed a feint at a charge, to slow up the advance, trying to provide a little bit of cover. That route's still going on. Liechtenstein having trouble getting his units rallied. Some of them are falling off the map, whatever. A bunch of routes over here from the Gulai command. And the Prussians are beginning to deploy themselves, some artillery. So I moved infantry over there and took a countercharge straight on it, and held, dissolving the Sebastiani cavalry unit that did charge. This one I didn't get close enough to do. I unlimbered some guns, scare that away, try to get some Atjay over on Lindenau. Up there, I held everything, including Langeron, who is perfectly well rested, but I want these two forces to kind of hit close to one another, and sending him in now would impact that. So that is it. And again, you know, maybe I get another half turn in today, but I want to go outside and do stuff. It's pretty, plus there's only so much of this I can take. You know, it is exceedingly draining to play something of this size. I'm not as, I don't know. Back in the day, I was a lot more willing to just play a game heavily. Now even my relaxation forms require that I take some breaks from the end of the French side of the 12:30 turn. Marmont rolled for initiative. He's going to pull back. The pursuit doesn't make a lot of sense. On the other hand, I don't really have too far I want to go, so I'm looking at a line down the covering between a couple of forests there. McDonald, for some reason, he's very tired. I don't know why he's that tired, but I recovered him for a turn. I may have put the wrong counter in or whatever. Or we could just call it foot dragging. Artillery duel continues here. It's looking ugly for the Austrians. Both guard are having trouble here. Not much pursuit here. And over here, the fatigue level's still too high, so I'm burning those off. Meanwhile, trying to deal with the Prussians by turning my flank because Sebastiani got chased away. And of course, not much happening up there. Murat recovered the unit he had. Decided to go chase down over there. And that's it. I thought the game was sort of slowing down a little bit, right? Withdrawal over here, throwing the Army of Bohemia into a more defensive position. Probably is going to mellow things out. A little bit less walking because I don't have to go over there once those guys come off. This looked like it was wearing down, but it's not because the Prussians came in and oh boy did they. Well, this hits. And yeah, I mean, I knew it was there and coming, but I didn't really think about it in the sense of, oh, that's going to complicate the game a lot. And then what I missed for, it should have come in last turn maybe, this column of Army of Bohemia that got chased off in the first day, I think. Anyhow. Maybe second day. Everything is just beginning to spew into a much, much more complex case. First of all, the withdrawal is not as easy as it ever seems. Having to back away some charges here to create squares. The guard especially, I've got artillery up here. The artillery doesn't really want to pull away because it's in firing range of enemy artillery. And unless I can, and I kind of have had to face that elsewhere. Up here, that's why I've got holes in the line. Some artillery tried to pull out. Well, it just disintegrated instead. It's hard to get to disengage in general, and it should be. Over here, the Prussians taking up slack and pretty much covering the whole line. They've got enough force to do this, but also they're coming around the back of the old guard. And this could be a very, very bad sign. And then over there, we've got LM, Latrousse Matek or whatever, Latour, I don't know his second name, has pushed his cav up over the hill and over the stream and up the hill and whatnot to provide a threat. Well, the Russians are throwing a bunch of their cav to deal with that. That's going to be a mess. And following that, we got the column beginning to deploy here. This one getting closer. It's much smaller. Austin Sakin's force, and see what happens. If the guard, I don't know what to do if the old guard fails. Some of me says there has to be repercussions to putting them in an important position and letting them just die on the vine. It depends on how badly they fail, but they're getting the shit kicked out of them numbers-wise. And if they can't hold that position, well, there's another corps. If that other corps was replacing them and they pulled out, I'd be fine. That other corps is doing something else, though, and it's going to be smashing into the Prussians, and everything's just going to be a fucking mess. But yeah, I had hopes that things would be easy. This is just, I did the charges and the movement, and that's it for a while. Things about the section opening up there is more walking, right? So earlier throughout the game, I've had, throughout this day, action going on up there and through here that kind of requires me to stand over on that side of the board. For the rest of this, I pretty much center myself here. There's some question of where the charts are. So the coalition chart sits over here when I'm doing this section, and I move it over here for easier reach when I'm doing this section. But now I have a third completely different standing place, which is over in that corner. Now, when I'm moving pieces, that's not, I had to do that anyway, right? But what does it mean in terms of the game? Okay, well, first thing, and I do want to point this out because this is some of the, hey, it's really big, Cav Charges. So on any player turn, I have to search anywhere where there's enemy units kind of in close contact to see, do I want to do a Cav Charge? And of course, if I do, I have to bring my charts, my dice, and all that. And I only have basically 2 sets of dice here. I could grab more, but in terms of the colors, etc., this is, I probably can get another set of blue and green, which is what I need for up there, so maybe I'll pull some there. I also only have 2 sets of charts, so I don't have to carry my chart over there, I don't have to carry the dice, I just carry the lost charts over there. So that makes life a little bit easier, but I need a third one now, and I can pull it out of another game. Okay. So that's the walk over here. For Cav Charges, I have to check everything. For movement, anywhere where that player has pieces, I have to go look. And this is not that big a deal, though. When I handle the things way off in the edges, that wasn't a big thing. But as you get into contact, the movement gets more complex. A little bit, you know. You're not just pushing a line of pieces down a road to where they're going. On the other hand, somebody commented, it looks like you're not using much of the map, which was true before. Now we're starting to see, hey, yeah, I can see where every panel might end up coming into play. For the fire, this is probably the biggest impact of all. So I went over there, I aligned the few units that had firing opportunities. So that's the defensive fire coming. I come down here, I do defensive fire. Come down here, I do defensive fire. I come over to this section, I do defensive fire. And then over there if that was still fighting. Then I have to reverse it for offensive fire. Now I could do the same path, but my charts are over here, so I just work my way back around the table. And I think this extra thing is going to add another 15 minutes to the whole for any given player turn. Melees, I do so few melees, if there's not a charge involved, they're really rare, just because the game with the fatigue rules really de-emphasizes melee. And we've been into that again and again. And then rally, that's not much more than movement. Or identifying whether there's a charge when there usually isn't. I just scan around to see, hey, are there any units that can rally? But again, this is going to be many, many more circles. The circling of the map becomes a bigger thing. What had been this little squeeze through here has added another step over here for everything. And I'm saying that probably adds somewhere close to 1/3 of the time to each turn, just having another little step over there. Not quite, because I got a couple of steps here, and most of the units are down here. But just walking over and doing stuff means moving all of my stuff. Interesting has happened in the fire and rally phases. I'll give you a quick overview as I walk through, but I did make a decision on play space or whatever. I decided to move the chart and the dice from over there to over here. I find the walk a little... So I guess the big deal